I never imagined I'd end up working as a caretaker at an abandoned theme park. Yet when times get tough, you take whatever offers come your way. I had been unemployed for nearly 3 months, watching my savings evaporate. And so when I saw a small advertisement calling for a caretaker, no experience necessary, I jumped at the chance. The job description was vague, but it promised decent pay and housing on the property. It felt too good to be true, but desperation sometimes overshadows common sense. My first day was ordinary enough. The park manager, a quiet person wearing a bright blue jacket, met me at the gated entrance. Rust had long since eaten away at the chain-link fence, and faded letters across the arch read, Silverglade Park. It must have been a colorful place once, filled with families and the smell of cotton candy. I remember my first impression. The entire park felt like it was covered in a layer of dust that no amount of sweeping could remove. After greeting me, the manager led me inside the park. I tried to ask questions. How long has this place been shut down? Or, why hire a caretaker for a park that's been closed for years? The manager didn't say much. They simply handed me a ring of keys, a flashlight, and a small binder. When I opened it, I noticed the words Caretaker Handbook printed in bold at the top, followed by a list of rules. Rule 1. Keep the carousel spinning after midnight. Rule 2. Ignore any laughter you hear from the funhouse. Rule 3. Never step onto the roller coaster track, no matter what you see. Rule 4. Check the maintenance locker every night at 2 a.m. Rule 5. If you hear music from the parade floats, do not investigate. And last, Rule 6. Lock the gates before dawn. Never earlier, never later. I looked up from the binder, expecting to find an explanation. The manager's expression was calm, as though these instructions were the most natural guidelines in the world. Follow the rules, the manager said in a flat tone, and you'll be fine. That was all I got before the manager walked away, leaving me alone in a place where the wind rattled the metal fixtures and the echo of long-gone laughter seemed to linger in the air. At the time, I thought it was all just a silly attempt to build a mystique. Parks were good at that, entertaining guests with a blend of illusion and excitement. Little did I know those rules would soon shape my every night. I settled into a small break room near the park's front entrance. It was equipped with a makeshift cot, a tiny fridge, and a desk stacked with old pamphlets. A single overhead light hummed, flickering faintly. Even though it was more than a bit rundown, it felt like home compared to living out of my car. I looked over the Caretaker Handbook again. The rules puzzled me. The first one, keep the carousel spinning after midnight, stuck out. Was that even possible? Where would the power come from? And why did it have to be midnight? The carousel building was on the western side of the park, near a large fountain with cracked stone statues. When I entered it that evening, I found the ornate horses frozen in place, their once glittering paint dulled. The control booth was still powered by a small generator that hummed softly in the corner. I decided I might as well follow instructions. After all, I was getting paid. At midnight sharp, I flipped the switch. The horses lurched to life, the entire platform making a grinding sound as it began to turn. The overhead lights flickered in a weak glow, and a whimsical tune crackled over ancient speakers. It felt eerie, watching those silent horses bob up and down without any riders. Yet there was something almost comforting about the routine, like I was bringing life back to a forgotten memory. I stayed there for 15 minutes, making sure everything continued to work. Eventually, I shut it off, hoping that fulfilled my duty. As I left, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. One of the carousel horses looked different. Its painted eyes seemed to follow me. I brushed off the feeling, blaming my imagination. It was my first night, and nerves can do strange things. When I returned to the caretaker's break room, I decided to check the other rules. The next one mentioned ignoring laughter from the funhouse. I laughed at that. It seemed silly. The funhouse was near the heart of the park, a garish building covered in peeling paint and old posters. Why would I hear laughter in a place that hadn't welcomed visitors in over a decade? At around 1 a.m. I heard it for the first time, a child's giggle echoing through the park, even though there were no children anywhere near. I froze. It was soft at first, like a distant memory carried on the wind. Then it grew louder, as though whoever was laughing was coming closer. Instinct told me to grab my flashlight and investigate. But the second rule rang in my head. Ignore any laughter you hear from the funhouse. I turned off my flashlight and forced myself to stay still. My heart pounded. The giggles changed to shrill laughter, bouncing through the empty pathways. I couldn't tell which direction it was coming from. It seemed to surround me like a chorus of unseen spectators. After a few minutes it faded, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the slow whistle of the wind through broken windows. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. If that was some elaborate trick by the manager, I didn't appreciate it. Still, I did what the rule said. I ignored it. It felt unnatural, but I couldn't risk losing the job. By the time the laughter disappeared, it was nearly 2 a.m. That brought me to the next rule. According to the handbook, I had to check the maintenance locker every night at exactly 2 a.m. The locker was located in a small building next to the old bumper cars. The structure was covered in chipped green paint, with big bold letters that once spelled out "Staff Only." Inside were dusty shelves crammed with spare parts, cleaning supplies, and a row of metal cabinets that smelled like oil. I wandered through the dark building, shining my flashlight on each shelf. At first glance, I didn't notice anything unusual, but then I realized one of the cabinet doors was slightly ajar. Cautiously, I nudged it open with my foot. Inside was a single object, a tiny wooden box. It looked handmade, with a small latch on the front. Curious, I picked it up. It felt light, almost hollow. The box bore the park's name etched into its lid, along with what appeared to be stylized stars. I debated opening it right there, but a tug of caution kept me from lifting the lid. Instead, I decided to tuck it into my jacket and examine it later in the break room. I closed the cabinet, scanned the rest of the locker, and found nothing else out of place. Mission accomplished, or so I thought. Something about that box left me feeling uneasy, like I was holding a piece of the park's past that should have been forgotten. Back in my break room, I set the box on the desk. I placed my keys beside it, took a deep breath, and gently unlatched the lid. Inside was a stack of old photographs. They were faded, but I could make out families standing in front of rides and children smiling on the carousel. The images could have been from 20 or 30 years ago. At the bottom of the stack was a small note, handwritten in shaky letters. They don't know they're gone. Please keep the rides running, or they will wonder where we went. I felt a chill run down my arms. The message was vague, but it sent my imagination spiraling. Who wrote it, and why? What did "they don't know they're gone" mean? Were the children in these photos somehow stuck here? The park was old enough to have hosted countless families, but I couldn't shake the idea that something lingered in the shadows. I couldn't sleep after that. The wind howled outside, making the fence rattle, and an occasional squeak sounded from somewhere in the park. I told myself it was just the carousel horses swaying in the breeze, yet, every once in a while, I thought I heard the distant sound of carnival music, faint, crackling, and definitely out of place in a deserted park. The next evening, I tried to keep myself busy by walking the perimeter. The sun dipped behind the corroded roller coaster track, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. I couldn't help but stare at the massive metal structure towering over the park. The track was curved and twisted, dotted with broken support beams. Something about it made me uneasy. Perhaps it was the third rule: never step onto the roller coaster track, no matter what you see. Why would I even consider walking on a dilapidated coaster track? The rule itself suggested there might be some reason I'd be tempted, but I tried not to dwell on it. Midnight arrived, and I dragged myself to the carousel to keep it spinning. The same grinding noise echoed, and the overhead bulbs flickered. This time, I thought I saw a silhouette perched on one of the horses. A shadowy figure that vanished the moment I blinked. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light. As the carousel continued to spin, I felt a presence behind me. I whipped around, flashlight in hand. Nobody was there. Immediately after turning off the carousel, I heard the funhouse laughter again. It started softly before rising to an eerie chorus. I managed to hold steady, recalling the rule, do not go to the funhouse. I forced my feet to remain planted, fighting every instinct to investigate. Eventually the laughter ceased. Then came 2:00 a.m., time to check the maintenance locker. The same cabinet door was open again, though I was sure I had shut it properly the previous night. Inside lay the wooden box, but the photos had been rearranged. The one on top now showed a family of 4 standing in front of the roller coaster. Their faces were mostly obscured by stains or damage. Underneath that picture was a new note written in that same shaky hand. You have seen the carousel. Do not allow them to wander. I stayed up the rest of the night, listening to the wind and feeling as if the walls had eyes. That sense of being watched ate away at me. On my 3rd day, I mustered the courage to wander the park in daylight. The morning sun revealed more decay than I had noticed before. Chipped paint on the spinning teacups, shattered glass in the ticket booths, and debris in the empty concession stands. It was heartbreaking, imagining how lively this place once was. A sense of melancholy weighed on my chest as I walked through an avenue of broken games, ring tosses, milk bottle stands, and balloon darts. I found myself drawn to the funhouse. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, a hallway of mirrors reflected my image 100 times over. The place smelled stale, and pieces of the floor were warped by moisture. I thought about the rule to ignore laughter from this building. Seeing it in broad daylight, I struggled to imagine how it could produce those unsettling giggles. I stepped gingerly through the corridor, glancing at each mirror. Some were cracked, others were covered in grime. Toward the end, I found a large mirror that seemed untouched by time. My reflection was crystal clear, almost too clear. As I peered into it, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. For a second, I thought I saw someone else standing beside me, a faint outline of a small shape. When I turned around, nothing was there. I left in a hurry, ignoring the dust that clung to my clothes. A note pinned to the exit door caught my eye. No laughing matter. Maybe it was leftover decor, but it felt more like a warning. By nightfall, I was on edge. I followed the carousel routine again at midnight. The same grinding, the same flickering lights, and the same sense of invisible eyes watching. Then, right after I shut it off, I heard a distant voice. It wasn't a giggle or laughter. It was more like a hushed call echoing through the park. My heart pounded. I told myself to ignore it, but something about the voice seemed almost pleading. I glanced in the direction of the roller coaster. The silhouette of the track was an ominous presence in the moonlight. I took a step forward, then remembered the rule. Never step onto the roller coaster track, no matter what you see. The voice called again, faint as a whisper carried by the wind. Against my better judgment, I crept closer to the fence that enclosed the coaster. Standing there, I shone my flashlight along the rails. Suddenly, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure stood on the track, arms raised as though beckoning for help. It looked like a child, clothes tattered, hair matted with dust. For a split second, I considered scaling the fence, but the rule echoed in my mind. Backing away was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. That figure remained in place, unmoving, until I turned my eyes away. When I looked back, it was gone. Shaken, I made my way to the maintenance locker for the 2:00 a.m. check. The cabinet door was open yet again, and the wooden box sat there as if waiting for me. This time, no new photographs or notes had been added. But there was something else, a small lamp with a cracked shade flickering on the floor. It wasn't there before. I picked it up, noticing dried mud around the base. Suddenly, that faint voice from the roller coaster echoed inside my head. It was like a memory, though I couldn't place whose voice it was. A sense of sadness washed over me, and I left the locker in a hurry. Back in the break room, I paced back and forth. The park's energy felt heavier tonight, as if everything was stirring after so many years of slumber. My mind drifted to the note in the wooden box. They don't know they're gone. Could these apparitions be echoes of guests who once enjoyed the park? Or was it all an elaborate test? On the fourth night, a new problem appeared. I heard music playing from the parade floats. The caretaker's handbook clearly said, "If you hear music from the parade floats, do not investigate." Around 1:30 a.m., I heard it, a jaunty, cheerful tune, the sort you'd expect from a midday parade. The notes echoed through the park, strangely distorted, as though played by ancient speakers. I remembered the rules and forced myself to stay in the break room, but the music grew louder, beckoning me like a memory of happier times. My curiosity gnawed at me. After all, I was the caretaker. Maybe there was a malfunctioning audio system that I could switch off. The thought of saving the park some energy bills and possible equipment damage briefly overruled my caution. I grabbed my keys, stepped outside, and followed the sound toward a large storage area behind the main stage. As I got closer, the music distorted into a bizarre medley of upbeat notes and jarring static. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw colorful lights dancing in the distance. Then I remembered the rule. The entire park was swirling with unseen tension. I imagined stepping into a trap, or worse, breaking a rule that seemed crafted to keep me safe. My instinct screamed at me to turn around. Heart pounding, I made the tough call to go back. The music persisted for another 10 minutes before cutting out, leaving an unnerving silence in its wake. Over the next few nights, the rules became my lifeline. I kept the carousel spinning after midnight, ignored the laughter from the funhouse, stayed away from the roller coaster track, checked the maintenance locker, and resisted the urge to investigate strange music. Despite my best efforts, the park seemed determined to draw me into its mysteries. The faint laughter grew louder, silhouettes became clearer, and I started noticing shadows darting between broken concession stands. In the maintenance locker, the wooden box greeted me each night. Sometimes, it contained a new photo. Once it was an image of a smiling employee standing at a ride control panel. Another time, it showed a clown-themed cart with children gathered around it. Always, there was a note. A single line that felt like it was urging me to continue obeying the rules, as if each line of text pulled me further into the park's story. I began to realize that following these rules might not only protect me, but also preserve something else. Some fragile balance between what was once here and what remains. The carousel, the funhouse, the roller coaster, the maintenance locker, and the parade floats all seemed tied to something intangible. On the seventh night, a storm rolled in. Lightning illuminated the park, casting quick flashes of brightness across the rusted rides. Thunder boomed and a downpour drenched everything in sheets of cold rain. Despite the weather, I kept up my routine. I headed to the carousel at midnight, flipping the switch. It squealed to life, water spraying as the painted horses moved in a slow circle. I felt oddly sorry for them, these silent guardians of a once happy attraction. That's when I noticed movement along the edge of the carousel's platform. A small hand reached out from behind one of the horses. My heart leapt into my throat. A child peeked out, a figure with wide eyes that looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Rain poured down and thunder rumbled again, making the lights flicker. In the brief darkness, the child vanished. But I could still sense I wasn't alone. The laughter from the funhouse erupted louder than ever, echoing above the storm's clamor. The combination of thunder, rain, and eerie giggles sent a shiver through me. I forced myself to stick to the rules and left the carousel building as soon as I shut down the ride. The Caretaker handbook's instructions were my only anchor, reminding me not to investigate the laughter, not to step onto the coaster track, and not to chase any illusions. I splashed through puddles on my way to the maintenance locker. At 2:00 a.m., I entered, my flashlight revealing water dripping from the ceiling. The cabinet door was not just open. It had been ripped off its hinges. The wooden box lay toppled on the floor, its contents scattered. Photographs were soaked and torn, and a single note stuck to the side of the cabinet with a piece of tape. "They need the rides. Do not break the cycle." Lightning illuminated the room, revealing a shadow in the corner. I whirled around, but the flash ended, and the corner was empty. My heart hammered as I knelt to pick up the wet photographs. Each one was ruined by water, the faces blurring into unreadable smears. The sense of urgency in the note was clear. Whatever was happening, it was escalating. By my 8th night, I was physically and mentally drained. The storm had subsided, but a thick fog blanketed the park. Every building seemed to float in a sea of white mist. I tried to follow the rules as usual, but something inside me sensed that this night would test me. My anxiety spiked as midnight approached. I had the keys, the flashlight, and the Caretaker handbook, but I still felt unprepared. I performed the carousel routine. As it spun, I realized that some of the horses were missing their eyes entirely. Small black holes in place of painted pupils. I could have sworn they were intact the previous nights. I stayed only as long as necessary before switching it off. Immediately, that mocking laughter from the funhouse returned, along with faint parade music in the distance. Both rules told me to ignore these things, so I did. My hands shook as I left. As I headed to the maintenance locker for the 2 a.m. check, I passed by the roller coaster fence. Without warning, the entire track lit up with flashing lights, as though the coaster was fully operational. My heart nearly stopped. The lights formed patterns, casting dancing shapes into the sky. Then came the voice again, the same faint cry I'd heard on the 2nd or 3rd night. It felt like it was calling my name, though I couldn't be sure. Fear seized me, but I kept walking. Rule 3 was explicit. Never step onto the coaster track. Finally, I arrived at the locker. The door creaked open, and inside, water still dripped from the storm's aftermath. The cabinet lay broken. The wooden box was nowhere to be found. Instead, on the ground rested a single glossy photo, seemingly untouched by the water. It showed the carousel in its heyday, children riding the horses, smiling widely, their faces full of joy. I recognized the building behind them as the funhouse. The note on the back read, "Keep their memories alive or they will find another way." A chill ran down my spine. I stepped back, only to hear something moving behind me. At that moment, every light in the locker flickered, and the carousel's distorted tune echoed from across the park. It was time to leave. My instincts screamed for me to pack my belongings and run. I rushed out of the locker, the Caretaker binder clutched to my chest. Making my way to the break room, I threw everything I owned into a duffel bag. The last thing I wanted was to abandon my job without notice. But my sense of self-preservation had taken over. The rules felt like a tightrope. One slip, and I'd face consequences I couldn't comprehend. While I was stuffing clothes into the bag, the park's power surged. The lights across the property blinked in unison, revealing flickers of carnival colors through the small break room window. In that brief moment of illumination, I saw shadows swirling outside, as though the park were alive with visitors once more. An old parade tune squealed through the speakers, underscored by soft laughter that resonated from every direction. I yanked the door open, adrenaline fueling my escape. I ran down the deserted main street, past silent game booths and the towering roller coaster. The sense of urgency was overwhelming. Fog still clung to the park, but faint outlines of figures seemed to move within it, drawn by the swirling lights and sounds. At the gate, I fumbled with the chain and padlock, remembering the rule to lock the gates before dawn. My watch read 4:45 a.m. I had a little over an hour until sunrise. Something inside me insisted I still follow that last instruction, even if I was leaving. I locked the gate behind me, hearing the clank of metal echo through the silent air. Only then did I exhale. I stumbled to my car in the empty parking lot. The weight of what I'd experienced pressed down on me. The Caretaker handbook was still clutched in my arms. I placed it in the passenger seat. My hands trembled as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I sped away, looking at the park sign in the rearview mirror one final time. The letters of Silverglade Park glowed faintly as the lights behind the gate flickered and then faded into darkness. I couldn't sleep for days. My dreams were haunted by images of spinning carousels and silent children wandering among rusted rides. The binder lay on my kitchen table like a forbidden relic, its list of rules a reminder of nights I wished I could forget. Part of me wondered if someone else would come after me, taking up the caretaker role, stepping into the silent gloom of that park. To this day, I'm unsure what I really encountered there. Were those shadows and voices lingering spirits, or was it all a manifestation of the park's history and my imagination? The rules had been specific, and I followed them faithfully, at least until the final night. Perhaps I kept the balance. Perhaps I left it teetering. Whatever the truth, I have no desire to return. Sometimes, late at night, I think I can still hear the distant hum of a carousel, the tune carrying over the wind. I glance at the Caretaker handbook, the edges still damp from that rainy night. I'll never forget the note pinned to the box. They don't know they're gone. It's a thought that sends shivers through me every time it crosses my mind. Wherever you are reading this, if you ever come across an abandoned amusement park, with rules posted at the entrance, turn around. Memories of laughter and joy can cast long shadows. Some places refuse to let go of the past, clinging to echoes of voices and unseen watchers. Trust me, no amount of curiosity is worth discovering what truly lurks in the silent corners of a place that was once filled with life. Yet, if you do step inside, remember the rules. Sometimes they're the only thread between you and whatever waits in the dark. And if you hear the carousel music playing after midnight, please keep it spinning. There are memories there that do not wish to fade. Thanks for watching. If this story gave you chills, please hit that like button and subscribe for more eerie creepypastas. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.